welcome you all to the keynote lunch for the first ever Advancing Justice Conference. Again, my name is Tuet Lei, and I'm the Executive Director of the Asian American Institute, and we're in Chicago. AAI is one of the 4 affiliates, Asian American civil rights organizations hosting this conference. And our partners, again, of course, are the Asian Pacific American Legal Center in Los Angeles, Asian Law Caucus in San Francisco, and the Asian American Justice Center in Washington, D.C. Together, we work to advance justice and equality for Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and other communities locally, regionally, and nationally. So, and again, we want to thank our premier sponsors, Bank of America. Woo! Probably paying for a significant part of your lunch, so that's good to applaud them. Today, I really have the great honor of introducing our keynote speaker, the new U.S. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, the Honorable Thomas Perez. Just 3 weeks ago, Tom Perez was sworn in and assumed his role as the chief enforcer of our nation's civil rights laws. We are delighted to have Mr. Perez with us today, and in his first major appearance outside of Washington, D.C., because of the critical role that he plays in the coming months for our community. As the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, he is charged with fulfilling President Obama's promise to reinvigorate the federal government's role in protecting and enforcing the civil rights of all Americans, including new immigrants, those struggling to learn English, and people of diverse racial, ethnic, and religious backgrounds. You have Mr. Perez's impressive biography in your program books, but let me just highlight some of his key accomplishments. Mr. Perez has spent his entire career in public service, serving at the local, state, and national levels. He's also worked on a range of key issues affecting our community, from healthcare to foreclosures, to workers' rights, to language rights. Before he joined the Obama administration, Mr. Perez was Maryland's Secretary of the Department of Labor, Licensing, and Regulations, or DLLR, which protects consumers through the enforcement of consumer, wage and hour, and worker protection laws. As the DLLR Secretary, Mr. Perez was behind a sweeping package of state reforms addressing the foreclosure crisis in Maryland. Before he joined the DLLR, Mr. Perez served as the Montgomery County Council in Montgomery County, Maryland, and the first Latino ever elected to City Council. Earlier in his career, Mr. Perez spent 12 years in federal public service, primarily as an attorney in the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and as a special advisor on civil rights to the late Senator Ted Kennedy. As a Department of Justice attorney and later as the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, under then Attorney General Janet Reno, he worked on high-profile civil rights issues, including hate crimes and worker exploitation. In the last 2 years of the Clinton administration, Mr. Perez was appointed Director of the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Health and Human Services, where he led efforts to address race disparities in health and to improve access to health care for limited English speakers. The Advancing Justice Conference is very excited to have Mr. Perez as our keynote speaker, and in his first major appearance outside of the nation's capital, Mr. Perez will talk about his vision for reinvigorating the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. So please join me in giving, totally threw me off. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Tom Perez, the new U.S. Assistant Attorney General.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here, and thank you for your very, very warm welcome. It is so nice to see so many friends here and to come back to LA where I spent so much time in current and former lives. I want to start out by saying thank you to the 4 sponsors, because your organizations are really national leaders in advocacy on behalf of vulnerable people. I'm convinced that one of the reasons I was confirmed was that the U.S. Senate learned that if I wasn't confirmed by now, Karen Narasaki would have been on their case even more. So that single-handedly was responsible for me doing that. So Karen, thank you for your advocacy. And Juliette, thank you for your wonderful words of support. And all 4 organizations have just done remarkable work, and you are such great role models. Thank you for hosting us the last couple days, Stuart, on a number of listening sessions that we've had with external stakeholders. It's really been very, very helpful. And it's just great to see old friends, including but not limited to the person to your left, Julie Sue, whom I met in the mid-90s, who is one of my heroes, one of the true serial activists in this country. You may recall a story recently in the Los Angeles Times about a group of immigrants from Thailand who got their U.S. citizenship, and that was the case that gave me the privilege and opportunity to first meet Julie. And it really illustrated the importance of partnership, because what that case was about was people who were brought here against their will. They were forced to work in unconscionable conditions, barbed wire fences, not able to leave. They did not speak the language. They had nowhere to turn, and we were able to help them. And the we in that sentence is not simply the United States of America. It was the United States of America in partnership with so many of you here, most notably Julie. And it is that spirit of partnership that is so critically important for our nation and for the vulnerable communities that we try to serve. So Julie, it is great to see you, and thank you for the leadership that you showed on that case and the example that you set for so many other cases. I also want to acknowledge, I know we have a colleague here. First of all, Monica Ramirez is a Los Angeles native, went to high school here, and she is part of my senior leadership team, and I wanted to introduce Monica to you. Monica, if you could say a quick hello. My colleague Alejandro Millar is also here. Alejandro's somewhere. If he's not in here, he's out doing something, but he is someone who has a ton of energy. Although I must confess, I know, is Margaret Hughes still here? Where's Margaret? From our Office of Special Counsel. Margaret, can you stand up for a moment? If you don't know Margaret's kind of a low-energy individual, doesn't have a lot of gas in the tank, and those who know her know that she has an indefatigable spirit, and she works in one of our critically important offices whose mission is to ensure that people do not confront discrimination on the basis of citizenship or immigration status. And Margaret does remarkable work, and so I'm glad that you're here today. I also want to bring greetings on behalf of the President, because this has been a wonderful run for the last 9 months or so. There's so much work to be done, but I could not feel more honored to serve this President, Barack Obama, whose vision of one America is a vision we can all embrace. We are so excited recently to have reissued the President's executive order reestablishing but reinvigorating the Council on the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. When I worked at the Department of Health and Human Services 10 years ago, the initiative was housed at the department, and I had a great opportunity to work very closely with the executive director and with so many of you. And I was thrilled when the President issued the executive order recently, and I am absolutely certain as we move forward that the initiative will be reinvigorated and will enable us to address a multiplicity of needs confronting our communities. And so I'm very grateful to the President for doing that, and I'm grateful to all of you for your advocacy around that. We know that there's work that remains, but we remain committed to making sure that this is a success. I'm also thrilled that the President, among the 20-some-odd nominees for federal judgeships, has appointed 4 Asian Pacific American judges, or I should say nominees. 4. Including, I might add, our first Vietnamese American nominee for an Article III bench. We should be cheering about that. And the first nominee to serve in an appellate position outside of the Ninth Circuit. And so we're thrilled that the Second Circuit will have the benefit of this nominee. And so I am really thrilled that the President has been very aggressive there. And once again, I applaud your advocacy in those areas, because it is so critical to get the input from all of you on these important issues. And the most enduring legacy a president can leave are the judges that he or she appoints. I did say he or she, by the way, in case you didn't catch that. We will make history someday. Anyway, I'm really excited to be here, and I want to congratulate you all on this wonderful conference. I spent some time here last night talking to people, seeing old friends. I think this is a gathering of serial activists. That's what I gathered from watching and listening to all of you. And there are a number of you that I know very well, many of you that I've just met for the first time, and I can say to a person, I've just been so impressed. Whether you're from here, whether you're from Chicago, whether you're from Norway, wherever you are from. And there are 3 people here from Norway, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4, and we welcome you to the City of Angels, and it's great to have you here. Welcome to the most diverse state in the United States of America. And the state of California today is America tomorrow. And I embrace that, and we welcome you here today. I'm here to deliver one very critical message. The Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice is open for business. And I want to make sure you know that. I firmly believe that the Civil Rights Division is the moral compass of our nation. And I firmly believe that through the laws we enforce, we give meaning to the notion of equal opportunity and equal justice under law. When I worked at the Department of Health and Human Services, I used to pass by every day a bust of Hubert Humphrey in the Humphrey Building. And under that bust, and you'll remember it, Deanna, because Deanna was one of those people that I had the privilege of hiring there, much to the chagrin of some people in this room who said I was raiding the ranks of the community. But we need good people, and Deanna was one of many. But under that bust was really a principle that we can all abide by, and that was what Senator and then Vice President Humphrey said, which is the moral test of our strength as a nation is how we treat those in the dawn of life, our children, how we treat those in the twilight of life, the elderly, and how we treat those in the shadows of life. And regrettably, there are all too many people in the United States who live in the shadows, whether it's people with disabilities, people who are LGBT, people who are immigrants, all too many people, women attempting to shatter the glass ceiling. There are all too many people toiling in the shadows. The work of the Civil Rights Division is to ensure that we transform shadows into sunshine so that everybody has an opportunity to realize their highest and best hopes, their highest and best dreams. I had the privilege of working in the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division under Republican and Democratic administrations beginning in 1989. I had the privilege to call Bill Lanley my immediate boss, and the privilege of calling him today a good friend. I saw how the department operated in the spirit of nonpartisan decision-making, the spirit of collaboration between career attorneys and the front office non-career staff. I saw how it worked in the hiring process because I served on the hiring process under Republican and Democratic administrations. And the hiring process was governed by one simple principle: hire the most qualified people possible. No ifs, ands, or buts. And so I was remarkably saddened beyond belief when I read the report of the Inspector General documenting what occurred in the Civil Rights Division in recent years, because the Civil Rights Division has a strong bipartisan tradition of decision-making that can command respect. And it was a remarkable privilege when the Attorney General and the President nominated me to enter into what I believe is an era of transformation and restoration. We must restore the basic trust and communication between the career staff and the political staff that is the linchpin of decision-making. When I was working on cases, I had many tough choices to make, and we had many tough decisions to make, and we would go to the front office and have discussions about what to do in a particular case. And sometimes my position prevailed, and sometimes my position didn't prevail. But my voice was always heard, and that's the key. The voice must always be heard, and we must restore that communication. We must restore that trust between career staff and non-career staff, and we are doing just that right now. We must also restore public trust and public confidence in the work of the Civil Rights Division, and we do so by ensuring that we enforce the laws, all of the laws that are on the books, so that we can give meaning to the term equal justice and equal opportunity. And so when I talk about restoration, I talk about ensuring that we are restoring full, nonpartisan, independent enforcement of all of the laws that are on the books that pertain to the Civil Rights Division. No ifs, ands, or buts. That is a critically important mission, and we cannot do it without you. But we will continue to do it. We will continue to move forward. We lost many people over the course of the last 8 years, but many people remained, and many people have done remarkably important work in the Civil Rights Division, and I applaud the career staff that has done so many things during that period. And we have an opportunity, when the President's budget is adopted by Congress, to add 100 new people. And those new people will enable us to not only carry out the vision of restoration, but to also implement our transformation. Because we must continue to ensure that we have the resources to attack not only the long-standing civil rights challenges that have been around forever. And the first case I did a press release on was a case involving a racist from Oregon who mailed a noose to the head of the NAACP in Ohio in an effort to intimidate him from being an activist in his community. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And so we must develop that capacity to ensure that we are addressing the issues that are long-standing as well as the issues that are emerging. And as I was thinking about restoration and transformation, I found myself reflecting on your conference. And I like your conference's name because I like the word advancing justice. I like it for a number of reasons. Number one, I work for the Department of Justice. So it kind of resonated with me. And so I was asking myself, and I found myself reflecting on the question, what does advancing justice in the 21st century mean? And I came up with 7 principles that I would like to discuss with you, because I think these are principles that will inform our efforts at restoration and transformation, and will also inform your efforts to ensure that we advance justice through the work that you do in your communities, whether you are here in California, whether you're in Illinois, whether you are in Norway, or whether you're in the Northeast. 7 principles. Principle number 1, advancing justice, to me, means recognizing that many of the challenges of the 20th century persist with all too great vigor in the 21st century. I talked about the hate crimes case that I just outlined. I remember vividly when I was a career attorney in the Civil Rights Division, we had a case involving a group in New Jersey called the Dot Busters. They were a group of white supremacists who set out to brutally assault people from the Indian community, and they engaged in absolutely unspeakable acts of violence. And now I fast forward to 2009, and we're awaiting trial in a case in the Northern District of California involving an assault that occurred in South Lake Tahoe, again against South Asians in that particular case. And so the more things change, the more they stay the same. So many other examples of that. We continue to have challenges of ensuring ballot access for people who are language minorities. Those challenges existed last century, and frankly, they will not only exist today, but they will increase as a result of the suburbanization of immigration. Because immigrants no longer live simply in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and large urban areas. They live in Iowa, they live in Nebraska, and many of the communities across America, when the census is completed, will find that they have new requirements. And so, once again, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We must remember that the promise of Section 203, which is to ensure that everybody has access to the ballot, is a promise that we can carry out. We continue to have trafficking cases, and I talked about the case that Julie was so instrumental in resolving. We now have an entire trafficking unit, because what we're seeing is that human trafficking from virtually every continent on the planet is a human scourge, and we must be vigilant. So once again, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So principle number one, again, means recognizing that many of the challenges of the 20th century persist today, and we must retain that capacity to address those challenges. Principle number two, advancing justice means advancing justice for all. Taking on new challenges, making sure that the shadows that Hubert Humphrey referred to are eliminated in their entirety. Challenges for people with disabilities. And we have a robust enforcement program through our disability rights section of ensuring that the promise of inclusion, the promise of equal opportunity for people with disabilities is a promise that we keep as a nation. Inclusion, I like that too. I do like that. We also must address the needs of emerging communities who have not enjoyed protection under civil rights laws. It was such a privilege 2 days ago to be at the White House when President Obama signed the Hate Crimes Prevention Act. See, that one for me was quite personal because back in 1996, I was working for Senator Kennedy, and we had a meeting one day in which I was then a career hate crimes prosecutor in the Civil Rights Division, and I said to Senator Kennedy, we have this proposal because we've got this law that has a lot of gaps. And you know what? I've seen a lot of equal opportunity bigots in my work as a frontline prosecutor. They despise Jews, they despise Muslims, they despise people who are gay, they despise people who are African American, who are Latino, who are Asian, who are different than them. And yet our federal laws don't protect everybody and don't acknowledge that. And regrettably, it took 13 years to move from Senator Kennedy's initial vision to the bill that was signed the other day. And it was so remarkably poignant. And this is the moment I remember most about that day, 2 days ago, when the family of James Shepard Jr., of Matthew Shepard, I should say, who was brutally murdered in Laramie, Wyoming, in a horrific incident of gay bashing, embraced the family of James Byrd Jr., who was absolutely murdered in an unspeakable manner in Texas. And to see the embrace was such a symbolically significant moment, 2 feet away from the President of the United States. And to hear the words, protection for people who are gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, from the words of the President of the United States, was a remarkable moment for our nation. And so advancing justice means advancing justice for all, addressing not only the long-standing challenges, but the emerging challenges. Understanding that in the world of 9/11 backlash, we must be vigilant about protecting civil rights. In the world of religious discrimination and those emerging issues, we must continue that vigilance in ensuring that religious minorities can enjoy protections. So we must have that nimbleness to recognize that the group of people in the shadows regrettably expands, and we must always remember that. Principle number 3, advancing justice means there are no buffet lines. I love this buffet line, by the way. That was really good food. But you know what? We are not here in the Civil Rights Division to pick and choose what laws we want to enforce. And I will give credit where credit is due. The Bush administration did a very good job enforcing Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act, ensuring access to the ballot box for language minorities. The Bush administration did a very good job in the human trafficking context, in the hate crimes context, ensuring the adequate enforcement of those laws. But you know what? There's also this thing called Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, and the motor voter laws. And we must enforce all of the laws that are on the books with independence, with fair-mindedness, and we must always do so. We cannot pick and choose which laws we are going to enforce, or else we will not be advancing justice to the fullest extent possible in the 21st century. We must recognize that there are 2 ways to prove discrimination. You can prove it through intentional discrimination, or you can use disparate impact theories in certain contexts, whether it's housing, employment, voting, to name 3. And we must use all the tools in our arsenal, not simply some of the tools in our arsenal. We cannot tie one hand behind our back in the pursuit of justice through the enforcement of civil rights laws. And so there are no buffet lines in our Civil Rights Division. We will enforce all of the laws, and we will enforce them fairly and independently. Principle number 4, we will use all of the tools in our problem-solving arsenal to advance civil rights enforcement. When I served on the hiring committee, we gave out this brochure. It said the U.S. Department of Justice had this nice picture of 9th and Pennsylvania Avenue. And it said, Department of Justice, the nation's litigator. And we will always retain the core competency to litigate the most serious and complex cases in the pursuit of justice and in the advancement of civil rights enforcement. But litigation cannot be, in the 21st century, the only tool in our problem-solving arsenal. We must use the tools of outreach, as Margaret does so effectively in the Office of Special Counsel, working with groups, working with employers, so that we can explain the laws, prevent things from occurring, working with our nonprofit partners, so that we can ensure the advancement of justice, ensuring that we use tools such as regulation, executive order, again, tools that work very well in the executive order on language access, for instance, so that we can give full force and meaning. So litigation will always be an important tool in our problem-solving arsenal. But if we are to advance justice in the 21st century, we must have a multiplicity of tools in that arsenal. Principle number 5, advancing justice, in my mind, means taking partnership to new levels. If we are going to successfully complete the census project and ensure that every person in the United States is counted, we must take that partnership to new levels. We cannot afford not to. And I recognize fully that in many hard-to-serve communities, when the Department of Justice or some other agency comes in and says, "Hi, I'm Tom Perez, I'm with the government, and I'm here to help," that doesn't exactly fall on the most sympathetic of ears for very understandable reasons. And so we need to take partnership to even better levels that we've never seen before. That's also true in human trafficking. We could not have made that case, plainly and simply, without Julie's help. That is a fact of life, because we could not have earned the trust of the victims without Julie's help. And so we must continue to partner in that level and in those areas of human trafficking. We must partner with our other government agencies, because if we are going to increase opportunities for people with disabilities to live in community-based settings and not be forced to continue to live in institutions, we must not only work with the Department of Justice, but we need the help of the Department of Health and Human Services, because you know what? They're the money people. They can bring money to the table. They can bring expertise to the table. We need to work with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, because you know what? They can bring money to the table and expertise to the table so that we can address the community housing deficits that exist. If we're going to make progress in many areas of immigration, we will work with, and we have worked with, our partners in the Department of Homeland Security. If we're going to make progress in the employment area to address the glass ceiling, we must work with our colleagues in the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and our colleagues in the Department of Labor. If we're going to make progress on human trafficking, as I learned this morning in listening to many of you, we must build those partnerships with the Department of Labor, with the Department of State, and with everyone in government who is involved. We must work with state governments as well. And I'm proud to be serving with the Attorney General of Illinois on a task force addressing lending discrimination, because we need to address that issue. The mortgage crisis and the foreclosure crisis touches every community in this country, but it has disproportionately touched communities of color. And through the enforcement of the Fair Housing Act, through the enforcement of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, we can play a very important role in those issues. And states have many tools at their disposal, predatory lending and other laws. And working in partnership, we can move the ball forward. Hate crimes enforcement, working with local jurisdictions to ensure that people who attempt not only to break bones, but to break the spirit of communities are held accountable and brought to justice. So we are going to take partnership to a new level, because I firmly believe that advancing justice in the 21st century involves those new partnerships. And I have to say, Stuart, I am remarkably impressed at how you have done in the world of advancing partnerships. He is just Stuart is the first Latino executive director of the Asian Pacific American Legal Center. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Because last night I asked him the following question. If you did a pie chart of the race/ethnicity of the people that you serve, what would it look like? And the answer was 1/3 of the people that are served by your wonderful nonprofit are Latino. And that is just remarkable. You have embodied the principle, and so many of you in this room have embodied the principle that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so you're not looking... We can learn a lot from you, and we will, and we have, and I applaud those efforts. Principle number 6. Advancing justice, in my opinion, means we must reject the false choices and search for win-win solutions to vexing challenges. All too frequently, in times of greatest human stress, we have been confronted with those who say we can either promote our national security or protect our civil rights and our civil liberties. We saw the most infamous example, perhaps, in World War II. But we must resist those attempts to repeat history, and we must ensure that as we move forward, we search for solutions that protect our streets, protect our borders, but also protect our civil rights and our civil liberties. And I am confident that working forward and moving forward as we address post-9/11 backlash issues, as we continue to dialogue with the Rights Working Group, and I had the privilege of meeting with Karen and a number of others of you in Washington last week. That's what we're about in that dialogue, is about searching for solutions that are win-win. As we move forward on immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform, as the President has outlined, is about searching for win-win solutions and rejecting those false dichotomies that people put forth. And finally, in my mind, advancing justice is about persistence. 13 years ago, we had the first conversation about the hate crimes bill, and we finally got it enacted. In 1948, a congressman from New York introduced what would eventually be known as the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Civil rights is about persistence. Civil rights is about falling down, but always getting up. Civil rights is about recognizing that idealism and pragmatism are not mutually exclusive. I learned that lesson, perhaps above all, from my boss, Senator Kennedy, who taught us that we could achieve the promise of civil rights and yet remain pragmatic, principled, and passionate. And those are lessons that I bring with me to my work every single day. And so I am absolutely confident and optimistic that moving forward, the Civil Rights Division can implement our ambitious agenda of restoration and transformation. And I have an unlimited reservoir of optimism because I've met the dedicated career staff of the Civil Rights Division, and they are up to the task. I am absolutely optimistic because I have had the opportunity to meet so many of you over the last couple days and to see the fire in your belly and the commitment to justice that you all have. And I am confident that while civil rights remains the unfinished business of America, that we can complete a lot of business in the years ahead and usher in an era of unprecedented accomplishment, achievement for not only the division and the department, but for the nation. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be here today.
Thank you again so much. Let's give him another great round of applause. We're very excited to hear that the Office of Civil Rights is open for business. So, I actually just had a few housekeeping announcements to make. The next round of sessions will start at 2:15, and that'll be the last set of workshops that we have. But we really hope that you stay around, and reconvene, because there is a closing session and there will be refreshments, and hopefully at least just get to say, your farewells to all you, hopefully all the new people that you have met at the conference and have been able to make connections with. So again, we really hope that you stick around if you're able to. And just one last thing in terms of this session and your next sessions, to please fill out your evaluation forms. Okay, thank you very much.